Yo, this goes out to all my atheists around the world. Let's go!
Redlock's killing it.
Wake up and I feel like the bomb. My favourite website is reddit.com. Mess with me and you'll get what's good. Wanna get banned, you right-wing chud? You're dumb and always in confusion. Have you even read The God Delusion? My body may look like an elephant, but I'm enlightened by my own intelligence. I'm a real man, I'm not a boy. I only drink the finest of soy. Everywhere I go, I am feared. No one can match my mighty neck beard. I don't need your Bible or its lies. Why yes, of course I take SSRIs. I've got a good life, just me and my dog, cause I don't need no phony god. Facts and logic. Facts and logic. Facts and logic. Facts and logic. You are pathetic, your god is your alliance. All I need is to trust the science. So what if I'm fat and my hair has lice? At least I don't worship Jesus Christ. Stop reading those fairy tales, my dear. Don't you know that it's the current year? Your holy books are naught more than a fable. Now watch as I build my Tower of Babel. Oh please stop, you're making me wheeze. There's no such thing as Adam and Eve. Stop right now, no heckin' drama. Please no, not my precious karma. You study religion? Epic fail. I'll have you know that the future is female. I respect all women. No, I'm not fussy. Now please can I have just a crumb of posse? Facts and logic. Facts and logic. Facts and logic. Facts and logic. I'm an intellectual explorer, call me Dora. I'd fit right in Sodom and Gomorrah. If you like to pray, then you're just thick. But I love CNN, they make me euphoric. Everyone knows that religion is shady, so let me save you from ignorance, my lady. Jesus isn't coming, he came and went. You're never gonna get the final testament. I'll never believe, nope, nada. Go ahead and run another lap round the Kaaba. Religion gives nothing but more stagnation. It's about time we crush this misinformation. Going to sleep after work, what a long day. Oh, not another nightmare about Chick-fil-A. I'm tired of your faith, it just makes me frown. If your God is truly real, then let him strike me down. Heckin' crapperino. A few months ago, I made a poll where I asked you all a very simple question. What is your religion? And the results of that were very interesting indeed. 39% of responders identified as Christians, followed not too far behind by the 22% who identified as atheists. 17% said that they were spiritual, but not necessarily ascribing to any organised religion. 9% identified as Muslim, alongside 9% of pagans, with a mere 4% identifying as Hindus. If we break this down to its raw relevance, what this means is that 78% of respondents identified as theists, meaning that they believed in some sort of spirituality, whereas 22% of respondents identified as atheists, who reject such notions entirely. It's this 22% of you that I wish to focus on today. But why? What's so bad about atheism? Well, in my view, atheism is one of the most damaging ideologies of the modern era, and is responsible for so many of the problems we collectively face today that I honestly can't believe it isn't talked about more. Atheists pride themselves in being logical people who are grounded wholeheartedly in reality, which is an assessment that I, for the most part, actually tend to agree with. The reality is that faith in the divine is called belief for a reason. Because none of us, at least at this stage in mankind's development, really knows for sure how our universe actually operates. And as such, debating something we cannot prove or disprove will pretty much always be a fruitless endeavour. Therefore, I'm not going to make any spiritual arguments here. Instead, I'm going to focus on what it is that atheists claim to care about, and that is something we can all agree actually exists: reality. The number one reason why you shouldn't be an atheist can honestly be summarised in a single sentence. Religion is inherent to the human condition. Well, what the hell does that mean? There's this bizarre idea we have in the modern world that atheism is the default mode of mankind, and that religion is this artificial intervention that overtakes our natural logic, forcing us to act irrationally as such.
But this really couldn't be further from the truth. Judging from history, it is extremely rare for someone to be an atheist, but it almost seems like a rule for us to be naturally religious. But why? Well, from a biological perspective, us humans really aren't that great in many ways. We aren't as strong as the orangutan, we aren't as fast as the cheetah, we can't swim like the fish, and we certainly can't fly like the bird. But we do have one major asset going for us, and that is our brains. Our unrivaled intelligence is what catapulted humans into becoming by far the most dominant species on our planet. And one factor of such intelligence is our amazing recognition abilities, especially when it comes to recognizing patterns and shapes. For example, this is a video of a door in my house, and as you can see, it's a very ancient wooden door that is in dire need of replacement, with numerous scratches and blotches all over it from decades worth of use. And oh look, what's this? A seahorse! Come on, you see it too, right? As humans, it is deeply hardwired into us to conjure such artificial patterns and shapes, even if they aren't necessarily there. Before the dawn of cars and electricity, there was borderline zero light pollution in the sky, and as such, our ancestors could easily see the stars and the wider vastness of space with much more clarity than we do now. And what is it they did with such a vista? They, of course, noticed patterns. Some stars, when interlinked together, form shapes that we today call constellations, and from that spawned the concept of star signs and other mythical elements. Despite the immense differences between us humans around the world, there is one universal observation that remains true, no matter what your culture, continent, or country is, and that's that at some point in time, your ancestors were almost guaranteed to be religious, in one way or another. Indeed, every place on Earth has independently spawned their own deities and religious systems of belief. Europe, Africa, the Americas, Asia, Oceania, Antarctica, well, maybe not Antarctica, but you get the point. The idea that religion is this artificial construct, as opposed to one that naturally ferments, considering just how dominant it has been throughout the human history thus far, is a baffling declaration, all things considered. Now, whether or not it's natural because there is a divine being who made us that way, or whether it's some form of creative mental defense to rationalize our existence in a way that we can comprehend, despite my leanings, I won't pretend to be certain. But the fact is that humans are clearly naturally hardwired to be religious, at least in some regard, and this tends to manifest tangibly with large groups of people, a trait of ours that will always be apparent, even when we try for it not to be. And to prove this point, we only actually need to take a look at the modern atheist movement itself. Atheism started off as a movement by intellectuals who started to view the societal restrictions that the dominant religion of the time, Christianity, imposed as a cumbersome burden that got in the way of human progress, specifically scientific progress. I'm sure almost everyone has heard the story of Galileo, who in the early 1600s made the accurate assessment that the Earth is in fact a globe that orbits around the Sun. As a result of this, he was placed under house arrest by his local Christian Inquisition for holding such heretical beliefs, that at the time were believed to contradict the scripture of the Bible, and thus required punishment. This is why the atheism movement started, so that science, aka the pursuit of tangible and observable truth, could freely spring forth and blossom without such authoritarian restrictions. And as such, so much of our understanding of the universe has changed, even within my short lifetime. The best example of this has to be Pluto. When I was a child, we were taught that Pluto was the smallest planet in our solar system. But as time passed, we learned that there were in fact many tiny planets like Pluto out there, and as such, we recategorized Pluto as a mere dwarf planet instead. That is the beauty of science. It is ever-changing and always evolving. And yet today, if you look at what science is slowly devolving into, and by proxy its associate atheist movement as a whole, what you'll find is that it is becoming less about asking questions and more about pretending to know all the answers. To take the atheist view that belief in the divine is naught more than an attempt to rationalize why we exist in a way we can tangibly understand, it thus makes sense why, when said faith is threatened, as in the case of Galileo, such believers will respond with hostility. Because that would mean that the faith is wrong, and that would mean the reason why we truly exist would be a mystery. A mystery that is an open door to existential dread and nihilism. A door that no one wants to open. But the irony is, many modern atheists, when their worldview is threatened, become just as defensive as the believers they mock. As of the time of recording, trust the science is a phrase that has been going around a lot lately. And personally, I find this phrase to be absolutely fascinating. You see, I tend to write a lot, mostly for the scripts of these productions, but also numerous little stories that perhaps one day I will make public. Needless to say that the more you write, the more you will start to master the English language, and as such, gain the ability to read not just what the words in front of you say, but also to read between the lines. This phrase is a situation whereby I feel such logic applies, because when the average person looks at it, it probably doesn't seem like that much of a big deal. But it really is. And it's because of this word right here. The. Why is it trust the science? Why not just trust science? If I introduce myself by saying, "Hi, I'm Alex Hexagon," you wouldn't bat an eyelid. But if I introduce myself by saying, "Hi, I'm the Alex Hexagon," you'd be like, "The Alex Hexagon?" The Alex Hexagon would imply that there are in fact other Alex Hexagons out there, but you can just dismiss them because I'm the real one. The exact same logic also applies here. The phrase, trust the science, is a subtle confession of competition, implying that there are other forms of science out there, but that they should be dismissed because they aren't the science. And what is the science? Well, whatever the clergy say that it is, of course. Despite the fact that, as alluded to earlier, the very nature of science is to ask questions, now, if a member of the public shows any sort of hesitation about the reigning scientific dogma imposed on them from above, far from being congratulated for having such curiosity, they are instead hounded, shamed, and punished, in a similar fashion to how Galileo was. Meanwhile, those who go along with what they are told without question are greatly rewarded. Atheism has, in many ways, become a religion in of itself. It has its own origin story, it has its own priests, it has its own congregation. Indeed, the cosmetics may be different, but the fundamental underlying psychology behind it all remains the same. It's our way, or the highway. Of course, atheists would cry foul at such an accusation, claiming that they prioritise truth, not myth. Yet their truth is just that, their truth. They selectively celebrate facts that fall into their worldview, while disregarding all evidence to the contrary. Far from being a loose coalition of free thinkers that promote intellectual freedom and diversity of thought, the modern atheist movement has instead slowly transmogrified into becoming merely an opposite mirrored form of that of which preceded it, which is, primarily in the West at least, Christianity, with the values that most atheists claim to hold being ironically dictated to in reverse by that of which they claim not to value. For example, whereas Christianity believes in strict gender roles as per human nature, the modern atheist movement shuns such roles as sexist. Whereas Christianity preaches chastity in regards to intercourse, the modern atheist movement views such as a mere recreational act. Whereas Christianity claims that life is sacred and thus tends to oppose abortion, the modern atheist movement has branded it as a human right and vehemently supports it. Anything that Christianity stands for, the atheist will stand for the exact opposite, almost 100% of the time, without fail. And so, regardless of your personal views on said topics, what, overall, does this tell us? It tells us exactly what I said earlier, that religion is inherent to the human condition. And the best way I can prove this phenomenon is r/atheism. r/atheism on the website known as Reddit is by far the largest atheist forum on the internet, with millions of subscribers and tens of thousands of visitors per day. It is, however, notorious for being an absolute cringe fest.
F all religion. I don't care. I don't care about the Bible. I don't care what your invisible sky daddy says. I don't give a single F about me disrespecting your religion when it has shown nothing but disrespect towards what I stand for. I hate the Bible, and I will never agree with anyone who supports it. I hate everyone who tells me to stop talking S about religion. F all religion.
Yeah. Now, to show just how fanatical and thus easily manipulated and predictable such people are, I'm going to go undercover and use all my writing and psychological credence to manufacture a post that will reach the top of r/atheism. Do you think I can do it? Well, let's see. Introducing Alex, the undercover atheist. Alright, first, we're gonna need a new account. Let's call it Plus Size Skeptic. Genius. I must say I am baffled that name wasn't taken. There we go, Plus Size Skeptic. We're in. Alright, so this is the post that I've managed to come up with. Should I leave my Christian boyfriend? I'm a 24-year-old woman. He's 25. I'm an atheist. He's a Christian. Everything between us personally is fine. Our difference in beliefs have never gotten in the way until now. We've recently started talking about abortion. We've only been together for 6 months, so shockingly, we've never actually discussed the topic before. Well, as you may expect, it didn't go well. Of course, I'm pro-choice, and he's pro-life, or as I like to call it, anti-woman. I want to ask you guys and gals, even if everything else in your relationship was fine, would you stay with someone who didn't believe in a woman's right to choose? Now, without tooting my own horn, this post is a masterful example of social engineering. Let me explain why. To my knowledge, Reddit is about 80% male, 20% female, and I imagine r/atheism probably has similar demographics to the site as a whole. When social engineering for the maximum effect, you're going to want to aim for the largest demographic possible, which in this case is of course going to be men. And so therefore, by pretending that the author of this post is a woman, we will naturally elicit more responses, because men tend to hold women in a higher regard, especially when they are a rarity. In addition, I've implanted an appeal for attention, guys and gals, implying a universal desire for feedback, as well as numerous emotional trigger words, such as pro-choice, anti-woman, and right to choose, which should exhibit an almost automatic emotional response. Naturally, this post is also completely ridiculous, and intentionally so. The idea of ending your 6-month relationship over one mere disagreement is absolutely absurd, especially considering, as highlighted twice for good measure, everything else in the relationship is fine. Yet if I'm right, these details will simply be ignored and they'll just eat it up anyway. Why? Because we're giving them the illusion of power, by playing into the fantasy that a member of a group they view as their enemy, which in this case is a Christian, could potentially be hurt depending on their input. Alright, looking good. Let's check back tomorrow and see if I'm right.
24 hours later.
Alright, it's been a day. Let's see how it went. 582 notifications, 759 comments, 1,243 upvotes. 25 times the metrics of the average post. And of course, the responses are just as unbelievable as you may expect.
Dump him! Yes, he is evil!
OP, this sounds like the start of a potentially abusive relationship. What? Indeed, just as predicted, at least 99% of the responses were calling for the fictional relationship to end, with many acting as if the man being pro-life meant that he was the devil incarnate who had committed an unforgivable sin. This is coming from the same people who refer to others as a clump of cells, I might add. An almost voluntary religious delusion, you could say. And just as predicted, it was mostly men who were particularly engaged, mostly to morally postulate.
As a male, I can honestly and earnestly say that no man is qualified to pass judgment on the issue of abortion.
As an atheist male who always relates more to women and often find myself empathizing with women more, I would 100% dump him if I was you.
Would you stay with someone who didn't believe in a woman's right to choose? No, and I don't even have a uterus.
Not sure about that one. As expected, the responses were universal, fanatical, and absurd. But we're not done yet. According to Reddit, this post was read by just over 100,000 people. Now, 100,000 people is quite a lot, but I said we were going to reach the top of r/atheism, and in order to do that, we're going to have to do 10 times better than this. So let's fulfill their fantasy and give them exactly what they want. Today I left my Christian boyfriend. Thank you r/atheism for giving me the strength to do so. Yesterday I made a post asking people whether or not I should leave my Christian boyfriend, in spite of everything else being fine due to his anti-choice views. I expected to only get a handful of replies, but much to my surprise, there were over 700 responses. I read them all, and couldn't be any more grateful for all your thoughts. For what it's worth, I've had a few people message me about what I decided to do, and the answer is that I was honestly on the fence. But after reading all of your wise words, I realised that leaving is the only option. And so, as tough as it was, as of today, my life is now Christian free. I know I am just some random woman on the internet, and most of you probably don't care, but I just wanted to thank you all for giving me the strength to make this decision. I'm now looking forward to open up a fresh chapter of life, where I am now free to find a man who would respect me. An atheist man. Thank you all. What a ridiculous post. If I'm right, then this post will be the dream come true. It is both the fulfillment of 1, a member of a group they perceive as their enemy getting hurt, while at the same time 2, giving them a sense of moral gratitude over it. So, yet again, let's see what happens. Of course, just as expected, our post did in fact reach the top of r/atheism, with over 15,000 upvotes and hundreds of comments, almost all of which were, naturally, congratulating me on my bravery for making such a wise decision. Some people even found the post such a pleasure that they even paid real money to give it an award. Over 20 of them, in fact. So much so that I, the plus-size skeptic, now have ad-free Reddit Premium for the next 2 weeks.
Thanks for the gold, kind stranger.
Okay, so why was this so easy to pull off? Real free thinkers could never be so easily manipulated, because free thinkers are just that, free. They aren't predictable because their pragmatic nature makes them prone to originality. But the religious, which these atheists, whether they know it or not, are of course very predictable because their beliefs are set in stone. The truth is that atheists may have rejected the concept of God, but whether they realise it or not, they are hardwired to worship. And if they won't worship him, then they will worship something else, whether a political ideology or, more often than not, themselves. They are no different to those who they mock. Granted, as opposed to being a lesson about atheism, this series of posts could also be a textbook example of why overly moderated online echo chambers are in fact a bad thing, as well as how fictional tales can very easily spread to millions of people online with great ease. But besides the point, r/atheism is a place that showcases beyond any reasonable doubt that even atheism, the very definition of rejecting religion, can actually turn into somewhat of a religion in of itself. Now, of course, r/atheism is not representative of the average atheist by any stretch of the imagination. But even the everyday atheists, as in the non-Reddit using, non-fedora wearing respectable types, many of which may even be watching this production right now, are still, whether they know it or not, somewhat under the same religious dogma. Because as stated earlier, if one was to quiz the average atheist on their thoughts about numerous social issues, though they would certainly be less fanatical than their Reddit counterparts, the overall beliefs would probably be extremely similar, falling somewhere within the socially progressive ballpark, being the antithesis of Christianity without even realising it. Not always, but mostly. And this is important. Why? Because unlike Christianity or Islam, that promote a disciplined and positive lifestyle that makes its followers prosper and happy, the modern atheist movement promotes carelessness and negative values that makes its followers fickle and sad. You see, the atheist delusion is that all other religions, such as Christianity and Islam, are naught more than ancient historical artifacts that need to be destroyed, so that a new utopian age of facts and logic, without silly myths or superstition, can reign supreme, where we can conquer the stars and truly reach the next stage of the human story. But I have bad news for them. Religion is culture. It's not a coincidence that Christianity and Islam have billions of adherents between them. On the contrary, the reason why such faiths have produced so many ardent followers throughout the generations, and will only continue to do so, is because regardless of whether or not they are accurate, such ancient religions understand the human condition better than any modern alternative. The biggest virtue of the ancient religions is their insistence that human beings, at our core, are just animals, and attempts to instill us with an unbending rule set to ascend us upwards to reach our maximum potential. Not as animals, but as something more. That is, after all, what morality is, prioritising and promoting traits that are hard for us to pull off, but ultimately make us prosper. Family, charity, humility, chastity, and much, much more. But without such values being enforced, but on the opposite, inverted, then of course the opposite will prove true. The people shall embrace animalism and become individualistic, selfish, prideful, lustful, and much, much more, just as we see today in the decadent West. As opposed to having a prosperous population, the population will instead decline, and said society will perish under the weight of its own selfishness. Back when I was a teenager in the early 2010s, I went through a bit of an edgy atheist phase myself. And I remember I really used to look up to these guys, who were known as the Four Horsemen of Atheism. But now, when I look back at some of the stunts these guys used to pull, it just makes me cringe beyond comprehension. I mean, here's Richard Dawkins, one of the world's most fervent atheists, in front of a buzz that says, "There's probably no God, now stop worrying and enjoy your life." I mean, what kind of advice is that? And then we wonder why fatherlessness, drug use, alcoholism, adultery, prostitution and corruption have all skyrocketed across the Western world over the last few decades. Must just be a coincidence. No, it's not a coincidence. It's because you killed that. Big mistake. So you had a bad experience with religion via overly evangelical parents? Big deal. That doesn't mean you should throw out all of the order and virtue that religion provides. Are you a one-dimensional character? What we truly require is a sort of balance of beauty. A society that has a strong religious set of universal blanket beliefs that keeps its people virtuous and in order, while at the same time also maintaining the freedom for science to bloom and prosper. This logic will of course be common sense in the future, but sadly the future is not the present. First, we must witness the atheist mistake spread its corruption, whereby just like past utopian ideologies, harsh lessons for humanity await. Atheists will slowly learn in the coming decades that the futuristic, enlightened utopia that they were certain would be is naught more than a fiction. On the contrary, the world that they will temporarily craft will instead be a hell. They will celebrate illusionary victories in the short term, but in the long term, they will be overtaken and defeated. In America, such liberators shall of course be the Christians, but in Europe, as strange as it may sound, such saviors shall in fact be Muslims. Laugh now, as you may. Ultimately, however, this atheist phase, alongside its consequences, shall be remembered throughout history not as an inspiring lesson, but a tragic warning. If you really can't bring yourself to believe in God, then that's fine. Be an agnostic. Just don't be an atheist. The world is about to go to poo-poo. Alright folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully you got the point that I was trying to make here, because I know that this one is a little bit advanced, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, the overall point is that atheism has become a religion. It's a mould of many different factors: progressivism, feminism, atheism. They've all been put in this blender, and then what we have is this bizarre antithesis to Christianity. And we see it everywhere. They have their own delusional beliefs, they preach, they shame people. They're bizarre. They're very bizarre people, and it's a shame. And hopefully more and more people wake up to the destructive elements that this newfound belief system has, before it completely tears society apart. But besides the point, I have a question for you. Did you see an ad before this production started? Did you see an ad halfway through the production? Did you see an ad at the end of the production? The answer is no, no, no. And you know why that is? It's because of these legends on the screen right now. I'm going to try to do this in one breath. You ready? I'd like to give a shout out to Siories, My Two Pence, Nemesis 4534, Ardent Word, Craig, Daniel H, Crutonite, V, Scott Brown, Andrew Hamrick, Philippe M, Geometry Desk, Scrofulous Rex, Viriday, Wes FR, Bob Page, King Goldstein, Denton Cassels, Elif Ashara, BW Gaming Trigger, Matthew East, Trevor. Jesus Christ. Well, that's good training for my lungs, I guess. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm not doing that again. Anyway, folks, I'll see you next time.